Congratulations, you're under contract. You've got a building and pest clause, you've got a finance clause, and you've got a settlement date. But all of a sudden your lender says, we need more time. What do? As a buyer, what do? As a seller, what do? We're going to answer those questions today. So first off, from a buyer's perspective, there's one or two or three things that can happen. You can ask for a finance extension and the seller can just say no. Unless you're willing to forego that condition of the contract, the deal falls over. That's option number one. Option number two is the seller says, yes, I'll grant you the extension. Option number three, and yes, I hurt my finger this week. Option number three is that the seller doesn't grant the extension, but they don't cancel. They leave you in limbo, which still allows you as a buyer to continue to move forward, but at any point in time from when that contingency should have been met until when as a buyer you can meet that contingency, any of that time period the seller can cancel like that. They can just call up the solicitor after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days past that date and go, oh, we're cancelling. So as a buyer, do you have any options? As a seller, is that the best strategy? So first, as a buyer, no, you don't have a lot of options except to stay on your lender. If it's the lender, the finance in this case, stay on them from day one. If you have a finance clause that's 14 days, that's hard to get through in this market. If you have one that's 21 days, that's pretty reasonable. If you start going beyond at 21 days, I would say your lender is maybe not on the ball, or there's another issue with your financing and you need that extension. So, gosh, a lot of this depends on a personal situation as to why that extension has come up. As a seller, what's the best strategy? Well, again, that depends. For this market, if you have a backup offer and that backup offer does not have a finance clause, then yeah, you probably should cancel that first offer and go to the one without a finance clause as the backup offer. But if you don't have a backup offer, that could be dangerous, because if you cancel it and you don't get another offer, you're left kind of in the cold. If you do have a backup offer with a finance clause and you cancel the first one and the same problem arises a second time, you're no better off. So there's no real easy answer for this, except, again, I'm vacillating here a little bit, and I know I might be repeating myself, but as a buyer, try not to put yourself in this situation. Get your ducks in a row before you make an offer. As a seller, make sure your agent is aware these situations can come up, and on an individual basis, how should you handle it? And I have that happening right now. A buyer's asked for more than one extension on finance. We granted them initially, but now it's at the point where nearly a month and a half later and the property's gone up in value. So we put the property back on the market and I have 2 backup offers on it now at the same price as what we accepted back here. So do I start negotiating those offers now and get them up to a higher price and blow the first one out of the water, only to find out 3 days later they could have consummated the transaction? So that's where the shades of grey come in our industry, and again, no real clear answer. And then on the building and pest side, sometimes we see extensions asked for here. That's a big no-no as a buyer, unless it's a major defect which affects value, and it will come up every time the seller tries to sell. That's something that you can pursue, and if you need a building and pest extension for that, that's probably warranted, but make sure it's a major thing, not a minor little thing, not something you could fix for maybe a couple $1,000s. I'm talking about the foundation shot, the roof shot, or something to that effect. Because asking for that extension, again, same as before, the seller can say yes, they can say no, or they can just leave you in limbo and wait for something else to come along. The second they get it, they can cancel you out. So I educate most of my buyers in this market that unless it's a major thing that suddenly has been discovered, which the seller is probably unaware of, you probably should not ask for it. As a seller, if they do ask for something, we have to evaluate it. Will the next buyer ask for the same thing, and should we just address it? Or in this market, do we not have to address it? Do we not have to spend the money to fix it? And can we just find another buyer that will accept it? They're all the sorts of questions that I'd put to my buyer and to my seller to try and make a decision. And the last one is an extension of the settlement. Now, sometimes this comes up because the seller has caused it. They haven't done something. Well, then there's nothing the seller can do about that. They've caused the extension. But sometimes the buyer will need an extension on the settlement because of something they haven't done. Understand as a buyer, the second you can't settle on this date, the seller can cancel. So be very clear on that. So make sure, again, everything's lined up ready for that settlement date. As a seller, again, it depends on why the extension of settlement has been requested. And again, as a real estate agent, we understand things happen sometimes out of people's control. And even though we can cancel, sometimes we don't, because we don't want to be a month in the transaction and go back to square one if it's going to be a 3-day delay. So every situation is kind of on its own merit. And as an agent, I'm very fair in this regard. But also, that being said, if the buyer asks for a 3-week extension on settlement just because they want it, that's when we really have to say, okay, do we blow that out of the water and go to the next one? So that's it for this week. Remember, if you're buying, give me a call. Happy to chat with you. If you're selling, give me a call. I'll let you know how much your property's gone up above and beyond what you think. And if you're a landlord and you want to get your property managed by a professional team, well, hopefully you know where to call.